Okay, at the start, the design is laid out. And the way I lay it out is I use just a plain old common Sharpie pen that you can buy at Walmart or whatever. There's maybe 20 different ways to lay out the design that you may see it done differently than what I do, but I can show you that I just like this simple way of doing it. The first thing I do is take my pen and I lay out the design.
Website's been down since January. And my brother says every week it's going to be up this week, it's going to be up this week.
Now, let's say that I make a mistake. All you got to do is, if you don't like it, now you start again. So let's try again, do something else. And again, if you make a mistake, you can just keep drawing or redo it. Okay? Now you got it laid out, and I use the regular old hammer and chisel method. There's a lot of different machines you can use. I'll use a machine depending on what it is I'm working on. But for this little knife, I'm going to use just a regular hammer and chisel. Now the chisel, it's hard to show exactly how to sharpen this in a video because it's so tiny. And I use this to show you, this is just an ordinary piece of wood, and when you get your engraver, it's in a square piece like this. You have to do the shaping yourself, and you cut the top down, you cut both sides down, and this is called your heel. It's very important to have this at the right angle, and then your face at the right angle. If the face isn't cut exactly perpendicular, it will cause you to cut left or right anyway. So it has to be sharpened exactly right, or you won't, no matter how good you are, your engraving is going to look terrible. And so this is just a good model to show people exactly how it is that I sharpen one. Now, there are a lot of different kinds of cutters or engraver points, but I like the square one. So this is just called a square, and I use cobalt steel. There's as many types of steel there's that many types of engravers, but I've found that cobalt works the best. All right, so now we've got our engraver ready, we've got it sharpened, we've got our design drawn out. So now we're going to cut it. And this is the same as that piece of wood, but it's a tinier version. So the first thing, you hit it a little bit harder to get it started. Now, if you're turning to the left, you roll your hand a little bit to the right. But now if you're turning to the counterclockwise, you roll your hand as you're cutting. And if you're making a straight line, you hold your hand perfectly straight. That's a common mistake when you're new, is knowing how to roll it and how to sharpen your tool. So once you get past those two things, you're actually doing well. And it takes a lot more time to do a nice engraving job than what most people think. A knife I'll have anywhere from 20 to 40 hours in. A gun I'll have 70 to 80 hours in. And this is called an engraver's ball vise. It's a pretty significant investment. They will be anywhere from $500 to $1,000, and a few are even higher. But you can start out with just a regular vise, and in some countries they have a regular vise and they stand up when they're walking. Well, I'm too lazy to stand up, so I just turn this one any way and every way. All right, so we're going to make this a short version. And each time, don't try to, when you see that you're stretching, okay, you'll have a tendency to keep turning. That's when you make your mistake. Make yourself stop and turn it. Don't try to keep stretching to get a little bit more time. Now I'm going to connect this last line here. Okay, now I've got the major outline done. So for time purposes, we're going to shorten this video just a little bit. I would go back in here and I would spend some time shading it. That's what gives you the three-dimensional look, is learning how to draw and shade it the right exact way. All right, now that would be a lot more hours if I sat and did that. So we're going to show you this one this one is completed. Okay, it's had all the shading. Now the next question people ask is, how do you get that black in the background? Okay, so all of this background has been stippled, and this is just a wore out Dremel tool bit. I will take it and I will tap it like a zillion times. This is called the background part. So I've stippled all that quickly, and now the next part is how do you get the back in the background? All right, so you just saw me cut the big lines, and now we pretended to do the shading. That's very simple. That just comes with practice. You want it to look like a three-dimensional character. You want it to look like it could just step off there. I don't like it if it looks flat and non-dimensional, okay? I want it to look 3D. I want this leaf to look like it was folded over. And that comes with practice and studying other artwork. And then you stipple the background, which makes it even look more three-dimensional. Now, to get the black in there, now some people don't put black in there at all. That's fine if they're happy with that, but I'm not happy with it until I put the background. That's what makes it jump out. So this is called lacquer stick, and all I did was messily, just in a mess, rubbed it over it. Now let's watch what happens. This is my favorite part of the whole deal. Once you wipe out the excess, and now see how the black has made it jump out? This just needs to dry for about a day, and then it's semi-permanent. As long as you treat it well, it'll always be pretty and black.
And you get lacquer stick from an engraver supply?
You can get them. I got them off Amazon. You just Google lacquer stick, and it's made by a company called Markal, M-A-R-K-A-L. Some people use Rust-Oleum paint. Some people use model car paint. Some said they've used some kind of printer's black. I found that the best thing that looks the best is the old-fashioned fingerprint ink that you get a policeman to give you, but the fingerprint ink takes about 3 months to dry. So that don't work for my customers. They're not willing to wait 3 months for it to dry, but it does look the best.
Now, I see you got some graver balls over here.
Yes, sir.
Are all graver balls the same, or?
This one is the primary. Most all of them are like this one. This is made by a company called GRS. It is the gold standard. It's about the right size for guns and knives. Now these other two, this one is a little over 100 years old. It's primarily for jewelry and small knives because the jaws are smaller, okay? This one would have been in some jeweler shop in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Now this one is primarily for small knives and small guns. Obviously you're not going to get a great big shotgun to fit in there, or a large revolver. They're not going to fit in there. And the advantage is this one takes up less space at the hotel room, so I carry this one when I'm traveling. But at home, if you've got the money, the heavier one you've got, the better your art will be, because when you're hitting it, it's vibrating and moving. So the best scenario is no movement at all. So this thing here weighs about 50 pounds, so it moves very little. But if I tried to engrave a big knife with this one, it's just not going to be still enough. And so your choice is based on the size of your bankroll and what kind of piece that you're planning on working on. If your engraving is going to be fine, small folders, $300 would be fine for you. But if you're going to do guns, large buoys, you got to have the big one. That's the main difference. But now, as far as the tools, no matter what size the gun or knife you're doing, we use the same tools. They're just wider in width. You just don't sharpen them as small. But when I'm working on a little tiny folder, I use my smallest tool, and when I'm working on a big shotgun, I use a wider one. But basically, it's the same tools no matter what you're working on. And if you're ever going to do good work on expensive items, you got to have a microscope. Microscopes anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000, depending on the size of your wallet. I use a microscope when I'm working on a tiny high-dollar knife. Either one of these smaller ones. You really need a microscope to make it look good. But if I'm doing a big shotgun, I can see that well enough to do it. So a lot of guys don't have a microscope, and some guys say they wouldn't work without one. But I didn't have the money for one for the first 10 years I worked, but now I do have one I keep at home. But the most important thing is the lighting. If the lighting is not right, it will cast the wrong kind of shadows, and you will not have good work. The best thing is if your home has a big picture window that's out and you put your desk right so that you've got lights all around you. And I even know some people have a sunroof in the top of their attic through the roof that shines down also, or you can, and I just recently acquired this ring, but at home I have lights shining from all sides. If you don't have proper lighting and proper shading without the shadows, you won't have good work. And lighting is very important. It's just as anything else, and that sometimes gets shortened. People cut down on, one light's enough. No, it's not. I've got lights shining from all different, angles.
Now, what kind of stone are you using there?
All right, to sharpen this, these are very hard. So a regular stone that you have at home that you sharpen your kitchen knife will not work. This is called a ruby stone. I've had this one for 20 years, and it's still just as good as the day I brought it home. There's only two kind of stones that'll work for engraving. That's ruby stone and then the big diamond stones. Now, a diamond stone set up with an electric turntable, you're looking at probably around $2,000 or more. But if you're just a hobbyist, one of these will be fine. But it's got to be a ruby stone. A regular kind will not work. All it does is dull it each time you rake it across there. So a ruby or diamond is only two that'll work.
And you don't use any oil on that stone or anything?
Some guys use oil, some guys use water. I every now and then I'll add a few drops of gun oil to it. But here's the important thing about your stone. Depending on how hard you work, about once every 2 or 3 months, I'll take my stone outside and I'll put some powdered Ajax or powdered Comet on it, and I'll scrub it with a toothbrush, because all the little tiny microscopic fragments get embedded in this ruby stone. So you got to clean this stone every now and then, depending on how much work you do. It'll stop sharpening because it'll just kind of clog up, even the diamond stones. But I'll use Comet or Ajax and scrub it out.
How about ceramic? Anybody use ceramic?
Ceramic is not hard enough. The point is so tiny that each time you go across there, you're actually microscopically digging in. Now, there may be guys that use ceramic, but I've never tried one that worked. Probably 90% of the guys use diamond stones, but they're the most expensive, and I just haven't got around to breaking down to spend the money for them.
Okay. And you were telling me a while ago you use peppermint oil to.
Yes, this is a lubricating oil. If I'm cutting a hard gun or a hard bolster, what happens is a microscopic bit of your tip will break off. So to make your tip last longer, you put in a drop or two of gun oil and a drop or two of wintergreen oil on your little pad. Now, everybody asks, well, what if I don't have that kind of oil? Well, I have ran out before and tried different replacements, and you can tell a difference. It needs to be the green gun oil and the wintergreen oil, and every now and then I'll just cut along and I'll stop and just dip it in it. Now, that's not really necessary if you're engraving brass, nickel, silver, or regular silver. I only use that when I'm cutting something that's real hard. Some guns, you got to dip it in there like every 10, 15 seconds, or you'll be sharpening tips all day. So, and there's some guys that all they do is these little folders, they may not use the oil at all, but it just makes your tip last longer, and you have to stop and sharpen less, which all is like everything
It
else.
smells real nice too. I'm
Yeah.
getting a big whiff right
Yeah.
now. It smells great. Yeah.
What
All
else
right.
can I help you with?
Well, that's a pretty good introduction, Billy. I appreciate it, and glad we're all here at the show and having nice weather today, anyway. And we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot.